Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Courage and Fur for more amazing dog stories. The morning commute in Chicago's Union Station was a symphony of predictable chaos. Thousands of faces, each locked in their own world. Coffee fumes, hurried whispers, the rhythmic click-clack of briefcases. Officer Jamal Davis, a man who'd seen it all in his 20 years on the force, watched his canine partner Hunter with a familiar ease. Hunter, a gentle, stoic Labrador, usually moved with quiet purpose, but on this particular Tuesday, a sound ripped through the mundane, a bark. Not a training bark, not a playful yelp. This was a sound that vibrated through the very bones of the station, a primal warning that silenced every single soul in that vast hall. Hunter wasn't just any canine. He was Officer Davis's shadow, his trusted confidant, his early warning system. For 8 years this remarkable Labrador had served with distinction, his nose and intuition sharper than any technology. Hunter's specialty wasn't just sniffing out contraband. He was uncanny at detecting subtle shifts in human emotion, fear, deception, and underlying wrongness. And Hunter never got it wrong. So when that deep, resonant bark echoed, Davis felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. "What was it, boy? What did you see?" Hunter's gaze, unwavering and intense, fixed on a man in a tailored charcoal suit, Mr. Tim Cooper. Cooper exuded an aura of calm sophistication. His glasses discreet, his leather briefcase clutched in one hand. Beside him, a small boy, no older than 6, with wide, distant eyes and tangled brown hair, clung to a faded teddy bear. A silent anchor in a world that seemed to be spinning too fast for him. He wore a simple, slightly too large cartoon t-shirt. Cooper's smile was perfect, almost too perfect. "Excuse me, sir," Davis began, Hunter still rumbling low in his chest. "Mind if we have a word?" Cooper's response was immediate and articulate, delivered in flawless American English. "Is there a problem, officer? I'm Tim Cooper, a U.S. citizen. I'm simply transiting through to London with my adopted son. Everything's in order." He presented a stack of documents, pristine passports, adoption papers stamped by a Virginia court, even medical records. The child was registered as Noah Cooper. On paper, it was all perfectly aligned, but Noah didn't speak, he didn't smile. When Officer Anya Sharma, a warm, empathetic colleague, knelt to gently ask him a question, he didn't even lift his gaze. "He's shy," Cooper cut in calmly. "He's been through trauma. I'd prefer if we didn't push him." Davis's gut twisted. Hunter didn't lie. And Hunter was still barking. Every fiber of Davis's being screamed wrong. The documents were textbook perfect, yet Hunter's alarm was undeniable. This wasn't about missing a stamp or a signature. It was about a deeper discord, a primal mismatch between what was presented and what was felt. This is the tightrope officers walk every day, balancing protocol, the letter of the law, with the whispers of intuition. How many times had a slick, confident exterior hidden a sinister truth? How often do we as humans dismiss those gut feelings because everything checks out on paper? This moment, standing in the heart of a bustling transit hub, was a test of that very principle, and for Davis, the silence of a little boy spoke volumes louder than any official document. End of Book 1. The silence of a little boy spoke volumes louder than any official document. It's a common mistake, isn't it? We're so often trained to trust what's written, what's presented, what sounds logical. We dismiss the quiet warning bells because the person in front of us is articulate, well-dressed, confident. But sometimes the most dangerous deceptions are wrapped in the most polished packages. This isn't just about police work. It's about everyday life. How many times have we ignored that nagging feeling, that quiet voice, because society tells us to be polite, to trust appearances? Officer Davis, and more importantly Hunter, refused to make that mistake. Think about the everyday situations where this applies. A too-good-to-be-true offer, a charismatic individual whose words don't quite align with their actions. It's the subtle cues, the off feeling, that often hold the most truth. Just like Noah's silence amidst Cooper's calm. It's a lesson for us all. Sometimes the loudest truths are whispered, or, in Hunter's case, barked. "For protocol, sir, I'm going to need you to come with us for a private check," Davis said evenly. Cooper, without a flicker of irritation, agreed. He walked down a side hallway with the boy toward a secondary inspection room, his composure unwavering. But as they passed a mirrored wall, Davis saw it. A detail that chilled him to the bone. Cooper never looked at the boy, not once. Not like a father looking at a son, more like someone escorting luggage. It was a tiny detail, easily missed in the flurry of a busy station, but it screamed volumes. A father, especially one with an adopted son who'd been through trauma, would instinctively glance at his child, perhaps offer a comforting touch, a reassuring smile. Cooper did none of that. His eyes remained fixed forward, his expression blank. It wasn't detachment, it was disinterest. And Hunter, planted outside the room, a silent, unmoving sentinel, confirmed every one of Davis's growing suspicions. In the control room, the data Davis requested was being processed. Biometric verification, Interpol database check, a red alert if anything didn't match. Hunter planted himself outside the room, unmoving. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then a high-pitched beep sliced through the silence. "Invalid child passport," a tech announced, his voice tight. "Real name Leo Dubois. Nationality French. Reported missing 112 days ago from Marseille." Davis closed his eyes for a beat. Hunter had never been wrong, and this time, he wasn't either. Officer Jamal Davis closed the file with a slight tremble in his hands. Across from him, seated calmly in the interview room, Tim Cooper maintained perfect composure. He didn't protest. He didn't ask questions. He merely glanced at his wristwatch, as if this were all a minor inconvenience, soon to be cleared up. Beside him, the boy remained silent. More than 20 minutes had passed since they entered the room. No one had managed to get a word out of the child. He didn't cry, he didn't ask for help, but something in his eyes made everyone's chest tighten. It wasn't shyness, it was pure, silent fear. Eleanor Vance, a social worker with a gentle demeanor and a rare gift for connecting with traumatized children, was called into the room. She knelt beside Leo, offering him a bottle of water, then a piece of paper and some crayons. The boy took the crayon slowly and began to draw. First a dog, then a plane, then a figure with large eyes and straight eyebrows. Eleanor frowned. "Is that you?" she asked gently. The boy nodded, barely. "And this man?" Silence. "Is he your daddy?" The boy gripped the crayon tightly, then let it fall, and with a voice so soft it was barely audible, he whispered, "No." That no hit the room like thunder. Davis met Eleanor's eyes. She stood slowly. Hunter, still watching from the doorway, walked over to the boy. He didn't bark. He didn't make a sound. He simply sat beside him and rested his snout on the child's leg. The boy looked at the dog and smiled for the first time. "Your name's Leo, isn't it?" Eleanor asked softly. He nodded. "Can you tell me where your mommy is?" The boy stared at the floor. Another whisper. "In Marseille. She told me if I ever got lost to say I was looking for her." And in that moment, everything became clear. The documents were fake. The custody arrangement non-existent. The trip was a cover. The adoptive father had manipulated everything to take Leo out of the country. His motives still unknown, but the pain was obvious. Leo wasn't his son, he was a kidnapped child, and no one would have known if Hunter hadn't barked. How many times have we heard stories, particularly from vulnerable communities, where a child's quiet fear, a mother's desperate plea, is dismissed? Think of the countless cases where red flags were ignored because the perpetrator seemed respectable, or the victim was deemed unreliable. This isn't just a dramatic story, it's a mirror reflecting real-world struggles. It reminds us that often the most powerful truths come from the most unexpected sources, from the smallest voice, from a subtle drawing, or from the instinct of a faithful animal. The FBI's child abduction unit smelled of old paper and lukewarm coffee. On the desk, the case file for Tim Cooper was growing thicker with every new report. The Interpol red alert had triggered alarms across multiple countries. What once seemed like an isolated incident was beginning to unfold into something much darker. Tim Robert Cooper, business consultant, private security advisor, no criminal record, but suspicious financial transfers between accounts in Luxembourg, Texas, and Dubai. Davis closed the file, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. Beside him, Hunter lay on the floor, ears perked. It wasn't over. Not yet. Elsewhere in the facility, Leo sat drinking warm milk while drawing pictures. Eleanor stayed by his side, and finally the boy began to speak. "He told me my mommy had died," Leo said softly. "He said I had to go with him, that if I cried the bad guys would come." "Did you believe him?" Eleanor asked gently. Leo paused. Then he set the crayon down and drew a new image, a dog. Then he looked up and said, "No, because Mommy would never let me leave without my teddy bear." That bear, with drooping ears and patched-up seams, was the only thing Leo had brought with him from Marseille. He clung to it like a shield. Eleanor swallowed hard. Children, she thought, see far more than we give them credit for, and they stay silent about far more than they should. Meanwhile, French authorities had located Amara Dubois, Leo's biological mother. She had reported his disappearance 112 days earlier, to no avail. No one had listened. She had no legal counsel, no resources, only a mother's desperate cry that went unheard. But this time was different. From Chicago, the International Crimes Unit arranged for her immediate transport. An emergency reunification procedure was activated. Officer Davis received the call at 3 p.m. The mother is alive. She's being flown in on a special charter tonight. He closed his eyes for the first time since the ordeal began. Something inside him loosened. Hunter, as if sensing the shift, gently rested his snout on Davis's knee. When Tim Cooper was summoned for another interrogation, his earlier arrogance had vanished. He looked pale, restless, sweating. "What were you planning to do with the child?" the prosecutor asked. Silence. "Why the false documents? Why the deception?" "Because she didn't know what she was doing," Cooper finally muttered. "Leo needed a real life, a proper education, a future, not emotional chaos." "And you thought kidnapping was the answer?" Cooper clenched his jaw. He no longer looked like a polished executive. He looked like what he truly was, a manipulator with resources, willing to do anything to retain control. But this time, control was no longer his. This is a chilling pattern we see in so many cases of manipulation and abuse. The abuser believes they know what's best for the victim, overriding their autonomy, their family, their very identity. Cooper wasn't trying to save Leo. He was trying to control him, to possess him. He saw Leo as a project, a possession, not a person. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the most insidious forms of control come disguised as care or opportunity. That night, Amara arrived at O'Hare International Airport. The moment she saw her son across the room, she screamed his name. "Leo!" The boy lifted his head and ran. The hug that followed was so powerful it brought tears to the eyes of more than one officer in the room. Hunter stood a few feet away, motionless. He tilted his head slightly, as if recognizing that nameless feeling only dogs can truly sense. "Thank you for not giving up," Amara whispered to Eleanor through tears. "Thank you for believing in me, and in him." "We just followed the one who really saw the truth," Eleanor replied, nodding toward Hunter. The case wasn't closed yet, but that night, for the first time in over 2 months, a mother and her child slept under the same roof. And it had all begun because one dog refused to stay silent. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was packed, yet completely silent. Cameras were banned, but court microphones recorded every word. At the back, under stark white lights, sat Tim Cooper, his brow furrowed, handcuffed wrists glinting, the man who once thought himself above the law. At the front stood Amara Dubois, composed, hair neatly tied back, her eyes locked onto the face of the man who had stolen her child. And in the witness seat, little Leo held his teddy bear tightly in one hand, while the other rested on Hunter's head. The dog lay at his feet like a silent sentinel. "Do you recognize these documents, Mr. Cooper?" the federal prosecutor asked, holding up a thick folder. "I have nothing to declare," Cooper replied for the third time. But it no longer mattered. The forged documents, the shady wire transfers, the links to corrupt officials. Everything was laid out. The evidence was overwhelming. What remained was to hear the truth from those who were too often silenced. Amara drew in a deep breath as the judge gave her the floor. "For months," she began, her voice steady but strained. "They told me I was overreacting, that I was being emotional, that I had no proof, that he was a respectable man and I was just a foreign single mother." She looked at Leo, then back to the judge. "My son lived in fear, couldn't sleep, couldn't speak. And no one listened, not the system, not the police. No one found him." She turned toward Hunter. "Except this dog." The courtroom didn't stir, no coughs, no whispers, just the weight of truth filling the air. He barked when no one else did. He smelled what others refused to see. The prosecutor stood again. "Your Honor, this case is not just about one abduction. It reveals a system that often protects the powerful and ignores the voiceless. Today we have the chance to begin correcting that." The verdict arrived 3 hours later, swift, clear, unappealable. Tim Cooper was found guilty of international kidnapping, falsifying legal documents, and institutional manipulation. He was denied bail and ordered into immediate custody. Full legal custody of Leo was granted back to Amara, with protective measures in place to prevent any future threats. There were no cheers, just silence. One of those rare, deep silences that doesn't weigh you down but lifts something off your chest. Leo looked at his mom and smiled. Hunter, as if sensing the history of the moment, rose to his feet, walked to Amara's side, and rested his head gently on her leg. Later that morning at the U.S. Attorney's Office, a high-level investigation was officially opened. Multiple officials in Virginia were now under scrutiny for enabling the creation of false legal documents on behalf of Tim Cooper. The signature seals and custody certificates were part of a well-oiled machine of corruption, and this wasn't the first time. At least 3 other children, according to early findings, had been adopted in similar ways. Some were still missing, others were found trapped in legal gray zones. The case was spreading beyond borders. But for now, that was for the courts to handle. Leo's case wasn't just about one child rescued. It was a crack in the foundation of a corrupt system. It highlights the critical need for vigilance, not just from law enforcement, but from every facet of society: social workers, lawyers, even ordinary citizens. For too long, the vulnerable have been exploited, their voices muffled by complex legalities and the sheer power of those who seek to control. This case, born from a dog's unwavering instinct, became a beacon for others, a testament to what happens when we refuse to turn a blind eye and push for true justice. A month later, Hunter was officially retired from service in a small but emotional ceremony at the Department of Justice in Chicago. He was awarded a Medal of Valor for his extraordinary instinct and service. But the most meaningful part wasn't the medal. It was the paperwork signed right after. The legal adoption documents. Hunter was now officially part of the Dubois family. In their new home, just outside the city, he slept beneath Leo's bedroom window. Sometimes, Leo still woke in the night, shaken by fading nightmares, but when he heard the steady breathing of his dog beside the bed, he drifted back to sleep. Amara, meanwhile, had started therapy, not just to recover from fear but to rebuild her life. She no longer spoke in a hushed voice, no longer avoided eye contact. She had regained more than just her child. She had reclaimed her dignity. One afternoon, Officer Davis came to visit. He found Hunter playing with Leo in the backyard, the boy squealing with laughter. Amara was on the porch, pouring lemonade. "I didn't think I'd ever see this much light again," Davis said with a quiet smile. "Neither did I," Amara replied. "But here we are. A second chance for all of us." It was a Sunday morning. Sunlight spilled through linen curtains. In the kitchen, Amara was making toast while Leo, still in pajamas, chased Hunter around the living room with a superhero cape flapping behind him. "Captain Leo and his flying dog," he shouted, giggling uncontrollably. Hunter, patient as ever, trotted leisurely, clearly enjoying the chase. He no longer wore a police harness, no longer followed commands. But he still fulfilled his mission with more heart than ever, protecting the family that had given him back his soul. Out on the porch, a new flower pot held a hand-painted sign that read, "A four-legged hero lives here." That day wasn't just any Sunday. Amara had been invited to speak at an international child protection forum. It was the first time she would publicly tell her story. Leo stayed with a neighbor while she flew to D.C. The auditorium was full: judges, prosecutors, police officers, volunteers, therapists. Everyone fell silent as Amara stepped onto the podium. She took a breath and began. "I was alone, silenced, on the edge of giving up until a dog barked. That bark didn't just save my son, it saved me, because when no one believed me, he did." The room didn't move. "I'm not here just to say thank you," she continued. "I'm here to remind you that listening can save lives. A teacher, a caseworker, a neighbor, a dog, any of us can be the thread that keeps someone from falling apart." She ended with a phrase that settled deep in every heart present. Surviving was an act of courage, but rebuilding, that was an act of love. One crisp fall afternoon, Officer Davis visited them again. He brought a small photo album. They sat on the porch like old friends, flipping through the images, snapshots of the journey that had changed all their lives. "Sometimes I think it was all a miracle," Davis said, looking at a photo of Leo hugging Hunter. Amara shook her head gently. "It wasn't a miracle. It was a dog who refused to follow an order, a man who dared to look beyond protocol, and a child who never stopped hoping someone would come find him." Davis lowered his gaze. Hunter approached quietly, rested his snout on the officer's knee, and closed his eyes. No one said anything. They didn't have to. That night, Amara wrote in her journal. The words came effortlessly. "True heroism doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it walks quietly beside us, smells our fear, and lays down next to us when the world falls apart. Sometimes it has 4 legs and a heart bigger than our own." She closed the notebook, kissed her sleeping son, and she knew at last. Fear no longer lived in that house. And the dog who broke the silence had rebuilt everything. And so, the story of Hunter, the Labrador who barked when no one else would, lives on. It's a testament not just to the incredible bond between humans and animals, but to a deeper truth. That sometimes the most profound insights, the most vital warnings, come from the most unexpected sources. From the unheard cries of a child, from the quiet strength of a mother, and from the unwavering instinct of a four-legged hero who simply refused to be fooled. In a world full of noise, perhaps it's time we learned to listen more closely to the silent whispers, and to the powerful, life-saving barks. If Hunter's story touched your heart, and if it reminded you to listen to that quiet voice inside or to the unspoken fears of others, then please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story of courage and hope. And most importantly, subscribe to your channel name for more stories of compassion, resilience, and the unsung heroes, both human and animal, who remind us that even in the darkest moments, hope and justice can prevail. Let us know in the comments, have you ever had a moment where your gut instinct or even your pet's behavior led you to an important truth? We'd love to hear your experiences.